Hey guys, Bugcat7 here. Okay, it is Friday, September 2019, and I want to thank you for visiting the Stonewall Research channel here on YouTube. Thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. Okay, guys, well, in this video, we're going to talk about the copper that was mined out of Michigan in ancient times, some 500 million pounds of copper that was mined out of Michigan in the ancient past, and what might have become of it, because of all the copper artifacts found in North America around this region, these regions here in North America, all the copper artifacts that were found would come out of a large boulder of copper, nothing more. So we're trying to figure out where this other 500 million pounds of copper went to, and there doesn't seem to be evidence of it here in North America, but there seems to be evidence of it going elsewhere. And we're going to cover an article on Graham Hancock's site that deals with this, and another article by a anthropologist who was a skeptic about it, but as it turns out, he sort of changed his mind about it after he found out the facts. I don't know if we'll get to that article, but let's get through this article here because it's just so fascinating to me. And it has something to do with my research and even something more intense, which I'm going to go over in a future video, that might not be considered by anybody. But let's get through this article. I'll inject my 2 cents where I feel it's necessary, and we'll talk about it. Okay, so this article on the Hancock's website here is by this J. Stewart Wakefield, and apparently he's a independent researcher, but a very learned man. Graduated from Dartmouth and Washington College, a biology professor, and he's done many other things. A sort of little mini biography here. We're going to skip that. But very intelligent guy, not to be dismissed or put aside by anybody. But again, if you're not in the field of anthropology, precisely in the field, exactly in the field of anthropology or archaeology, whatever you find out is going to be readily dismissed by archaeologists and anthropologists on just those grounds alone, which is a shame, that these things can't be considered seriously unless you have the particular sheepskin that says you're allowed to comment on it. But we're going to comment on it anyway. Okay, so this is the shipping of Michigan copper across the Atlantic in the Bronze Age, Isle Royale and the Keweenaw Peninsula, circa 2400 BC to 1200 BC, even if they have that timeline correct. And we don't know. But let's get on with it here, because this is a fascinating article here. Okay, so this is a summary. Recent scientific literature has come to the conclusion that the major source of the copper that swept through the European Bronze Age after 2500 BC is unknown. However, these studies claim that the 10 tons of copper oxide ingots recovered from the late Bronze Age, 1300 BC, Uluburun shipwreck off the coast of Turkey was extraordinarily pure, quote unquote, more than 99.5% pure, and that it was not the product of smelting from ore. The oxides are all brittle blister copper, quote unquote, with voids, slag bits, and oxides created when the oxides were made in multiple pourings outdoors over wood fires. Only Michigan copper is of this purity, and it is known to have been mined in enormous quantities during the Bronze Age. Okay. The geology of copper. The copper is said to be the most common metal on the face of the earth with the exception of iron. However, most of it is in the form of low-grade ores that require a sequence of concentration mechanisms to upgrade it to exploitable ore through a series of proto-ores. Copper ores of the quote-unquote oxidized type include the oxide cuprite and carbonates malachite are generally green or blue, and reducible to copper metal by simply heating with charcoal. Ores of the quote-unquote reduced type are sulfides or sulfur salts, chalcocite, chalcopyrite, tetrahedrite, and are not readily identified in outcrops as ores. They require roasting to convert them to oxides, then reduction of the oxides to produce metal. There are a number of places in the world where copper can be found in small deposits in the pure state, but it is usually embedded in a rock matrix from which it must be freed by intensive labor or today crushed in huge volumes and treated to obtain the metal. The unique geology of Michigan copper. Early in Earth's history, there were huge volcanic outflows over the Great Lakes area. As new sediments overlaid these flows, copper solutions were crystallizing in the Precambrian flood basalts of the lava layers. The copper had been crystallized in nodules and irregular masses along fracture zones a few inches to many feet wide. After a billion years, about a quarter of the age of the Earth, supposedly, 4 major glaciations ground upon the edges of the old layer of basalt lava beds and exposed some of the embedded copper. Well, you forget about that because I don't believe in glaciations and all that kind of stuff. Ice Age is nonsense. But here they show some pictures of it here, drawing of the geology of Michigan copper, which is the top illustration. Okay. And here's some giant chunks taken out from that area of this pure copper. It's difficult to locate and find. Isle Royale and the Keweenaw Peninsula remain high ridges of volcanic basalt. The scraping and digging by the glaciers, followed by the surface exposure of the hardest material, the metal, was followed by sluicing of the land by glacial meltwaters. Well, forget about all the glacial stuff and start thinking about Electric Universe, Velikovsky, David Talbot, Wolf, and how the North America was just pummeled by interplanetary electrical discharge. And a lot of that stuff could cause all of these phenomena to occur other than glaciation, which is a bunch of nonsense. Just get that out of your head. No ice age, no glaciers. It's all bullshit. Okay? A stupid theory come up by somebody in 1823. Aziz. This left many mineral nodules of all sizes on the surface in the huge pine forest. This was called, quote-unquote, float copper, as it appears that it had, quote-unquote, floated to the surface. Nodules of copper were discovered shining in the surf along the shores of Isle Royale. The prolonged crystallization followed by the glacial exposure was a unique sequence of events. When exploited, it took man from the Stone Age to an industrial world. The 500 million pounds mined in prehistory were followed by 6.5 billion pounds mined in the quote-unquote industrial age in America starting in the late 1800s. Okay? Got a lot of copper out of there, even at a later date. And they say 500 million pounds, but they don't really know. Old world copper. Most European copper was smelted out of copper ores starting about 4460 BC. These ores often had only a concentration of 15% copper in them and had many trace element contaminants such as lead. Buried hoards of bronze are usually composed of broken axe heads, miscellaneous broken pieces, and lumps, recycling the valuable metal. Henderson's book reports a German study that did 12,000 chemical analysis of copper-containing artifacts with the aim of identifying quote-unquote workshops. They were not able to do this, but noted that, quote, hoards which often contain low impurity metal in southeastern England and northern France may be linked to the occurrence of copper ingots, which also had low impurities, unquote. Barber says that, quote, ingot or cake fragments are common features of founders' hoards of the late Bronze Age and often comprise pure unalloyed copper, unquote. Barber says only one mining site in the British Isles, Great Orme, shows evidence of activity after the early Bronze Age. Burgess says of the British Isles Bronze Age, quote, the remarkable thing that is that metallurgy seems to have started in the southeast, apparently as early as anywhere in Britain. Through the southeast has no local ores. Okay, unquote. So this could be the Beaker people who supposedly spread metallurgy at the time. These large people with the large vaulted cranial. So, okay, so just showing this lower photo. Alex Pagani shows me what remains of a 3,000-year-old miner's pits in the woods behind his rock shop in the Keweenaw. Starting in the 1840s, mines went down as far as 9,000 feet in some of these pits. That's mighty deep. The miners of Michigan copper. It is estimated that 500 million pounds of copper were mined in tens of thousands of pits on the Isle Royale and the Keweenaw Peninsula of Michigan by ancient miners over a period of 1,000 years. Carbon dating of wood timbers in the pits has dated the mining to start around 2450 BC and end abruptly at 1200 BC. So make a note of that, guys. You hear in many of my videos, I'm always talking about this date, 1200 BC. It seems that all of these societies around the Americas somehow stopped doing business around 1200 BC, or somewhere between 1200 and 1300 BC. Okay, they say in so many of these places, so think about that. Something happened, something big, okay, and it wasn't glaciation either. Officially, no one knows where the Michigan copper went. All the quote-unquote ancient copper culture tools that have been found could have been manufactured from just one of the large boulders. A placard in London's British Museum Bronze Age Axe exhibit says, quote, from about 2500 BC, the use of copper, formerly limited to parts of southern Europe, suddenly swept through the rest of the continent, unquote. No one seems to know where the copper in Europe came from. Well, I guess the Beaker people brought it with them when they were trading with the Minoans who were coming to America to get it. Indian legends tell the mining was done by fair-haired marine men. Okay, so who knows if that's true or not, or they got that right or anything like that. I don't think so. It was probably done by the native people's ancestors, whoever they were, large people who were doing this mining or whatever, but nobody came from anywhere else to do anything, okay? No fair-haired men or do all this kind of other junk. Who knows about what they're talking about, or they mistranslated it or something. Along with wooden tools and stone hammers, a walrus skin bag has been found. A huge copper boulder was found in the bottom of a deep pit raised up on solid oak timbers, still preserved in the anaerobic conditions for more than 3,000 years. Some habitation sites and garden beds have been found and studied. It is thought that most of the miners retired to Astalon near Madison, Wisconsin, and other locations to the south at the onset of the hard winters on Lake Superior. The mining appears to have ended overnight, as though they had left for the day and never came back. Yes, something very bad happened that destroyed everything in North America. Just one of the reoccurrences, because this happened over and over again, according to Velikovsky. A petroglyph on one of their sailing ships, has been found. Okay, so who knows if it's a sailing ship of people who came to do the mining, rather it's a sailing ship of people who came to purchase the copper from the people who are already here, who are doing the mining, whoever they may be. Okay, that's what I say. There's a handprint there for some reason. How a handprint gets into rock, I don't know. Some other petroglyphs, interesting petroglyphs. Okay, so it says the bird ship probably transported miners and copper. Cross off the miners and just leave the copper, okay? Again, we're looking at the New World bias again in every one of these things, even if you're an alternative researcher. Just people cannot get it out of their head. It's not the New World. Just forget about that. Their dates are wrong. Everything is wrong, okay? Skip that, okay? I'm saying it's a depiction of a ship that transported the copper from here back to the Mediterranean. No miners were involved. Just people on boats who sailed a long distance, came here, got it, and went back. And a lot of other things, too. Like corn and squash and beans and timber and furs and everything else all came from here and went elsewhere in the world. From North, Central, and South America. All sorts of goods. Okay? You gotta watch this stuff. Okay? Trying to straighten it out. Alright. Trying to get rid of that New World bias. It's gotta go, folks. It's gotta go. Sick of hearing about it and sick of hearing about people insinuating it because they're wrong. During this 1,000-year period of mining, some of the miners must have explored the continent to the west, as evidenced by strangely large skeletons in a lot of places, such as the red-haired giants who came by boat to Lovelock Cave on Lake Lahontan, Nevada, that were found in 1924 with fish nets and duck decoys. Why they're adding that in there? Yes, referring to the people that were here already, okay, the actual ancestors of the native peoples before they got the DNA from Asians and Siberians. That's who they were. Giant peoples who lived here. Those are the real Native Americans. That's what's in their DNA. Again, my research. 1800, Native Americans, the Plains Indians, were among the tallest people in the world for some unknown reason to mainstream. Okay? Hybrids. All right? I say. Budcat7 says. There is quote-unquote biological tracer evidence for foot traffic back and forth across the continent more than 3,000 years before the Lewis and Clark expedition. Yes. The Hopewell Procurement Network. Okay? Hopewell Procurement Network. That's my research. Okay? I'm adding that. All right? Huber describes the quote-unquote remarkable presence of the Shrub Devil's Club on Blake Point, the northern tip of Isle Royale, and on Passage Island offshore, and also on small islands around Rock Harbor on Island Royale. Its usual habitat is the rainforest gullies of the Rocky Mount of the conifer forest of the Pacific Northwest. Huber claims it appears nowhere else east of the Rocky Mountains. This plant has giant leaves with spines underneath and frightfully spiny woody stems. It has a history of traditional use as medicine to treat diabetes, tumors, and tuberculosis, with its effectiveness confirmed by modern studies. It appears likely it was carried in medicine bag to this remote island in Lake Superior in ancient times, and the places where Devil's Club are found are showing us where the miners were using medicines. Okay? Well, they got it through the Hopewell Procurement Network there, bozo. Alright? Silver in the copper. Pieces of the quote-unquote native Michigan copper sometimes have crystals of silver inclusions, mechanically enclosed but not alloyed. This is called quote-unquote half-breed copper. In the commercial mines, the miners are said to have cut these silver nodules off with knives and take them home. The presence of silver nodules in quote-unquote old copper culture tools shows that they were made by hammering, called cold working, quote-unquote. These hammered weapons and tools found in Hopewell Mound sometimes, quote, show specks of silver found only in the copper of Lake Superior, unquote. Apparently, one instance of identification by silver inclusion has occurred overseas. In this letter, December 1st, 1995, Paladin Jenkins, a historian from Glastonbury, writes, quote, I met the farmer who owns the land on which a megalithic stone circle is, called Merry Maidens, in far west Cornwall. While clearing hedges, he discovered an arrowhead which was sent to the British Museum for identification. The answer returned, okay, 5,000 years old. Source, Michigan, USA. All right? Trace element analysis. The temperature of wood fire is 900 degrees centigrade, and with charcoal above 1,000 degrees centigrade. But forced air fires are hotter, like doing with coal, like they do in a smithy, blacksmith. And who the heck found out how to do that? just metallurgy is a mystery. The melting of crystallized copper and pouring it into oxide molds, the shape of skin of a flayed ox, for shipping, wherever it was done, is the first step in its contamination. Remelting for pouring into tool molds can involve the use of fluxes, fuel contamination, the addition of used broken tools, and the addition of arsenic or tin. Since metals always contain small portions of trace elements, it was thought we could follow the copper by looking at trace elements in copper elsewhere to see if it matched. The 6 early studies reported by Griffin all report native copper at 99.92% copper. Rapp and others report that using trace element quote-unquote fingerprints, using mostly Lake Superior copper samples, probable geographic and geological source identification can be done. The work of Hancock et al. Showed again that the native copper, including Michigan copper, showed lower levels of tin, arsenic, gold, and especially cobalt than quote-unquote European copper manufactured artifacts. The British Museum reported, quote, generally low trace element content in our Egyptian artifacts, unquote. Years ago, the author collected some European copper and bronze axes, thinking that he might do some sampling of them from some commercially available trace element analysis. Unfortunately, sample testing is only useful for hammered copper tools, not melted cast ones. Looking at artifacts full of mixed contaminants in their manufacturing has, for the most part, not been helpful. We need to look at the least disturbed samples, the ingot form in which copper was shipped. The Uluburun ingots. In the excellent 30-page 2002 study by Hauptmann et al. On the, quote, structure and composition of ingots from the 1300 BC Uluburun wreck, unquote. The authors say that, quote, the cargo represents the world market of bulk metal in the Mediterranean. The wreck contained 354 oxide-shaped ingots and 120 discoid or bun ingots, altogether 10 tons of copper. Okay, so there's an illustration of it. Some of the oxide ingots that were found, here they are underwater looking at them. And here's some drawings of it from Turkey there. Okay. Actually, it's 3 supervised men are carrying oxide and baskets of bun ingots on the tomb walls of wreck at Thebes. So there's also an oxide with that. Okay. Additionally, a ton of tin ingots were recovered. The 120 ingots and fragments, a ratio which roughly corresponds to the ratio of copper and tin in classical bronzes, unquote. The cedar hull was badly damaged by a collision with the shore, but some of the wood was reserved by the corrosion products of the copper ingots. These ingots are all now in the Museum of Underwater Archaeology in Bodrum, Turkey, with the ingots also found in a later date Cape Gillidonia shipwreck. These are more ingots than the total in all other museums and private collections put together. Some oxide ingots have been excavated in Minoan ruins of Hagia Triada in Crete, dated to 1550 to 1500 BC. Others have been found in Sardinia, Cyprus, the Nile Delta, Turkey, and Bulgaria. Researcher Zen Halpern reports, quote, I saw heaps of copper ingots in the Maritime Museum in Haifa, Israel, unquote. Metal bars in the oxide shape dating from 1700 BC have been found at Falmouth in Cornwall. Oh, I got that right. England Egyptian New Kingdom tomb paintings and temple reliefs depict a great number of copper ingots, but only one has been found in Egypt as they were consumed there. All right. For many years, the archaeological community has thought that the lead isotope studies by an Oxford group, Gale et al., have proved that the ingots all came from Cyprus. In 1998, the Gale group reports performing, quote, approximately 1,000 lead isotope analysis of ores and ingots, including about 60 Uluburun ingots, unquote. They did not test a single sample of Michigan copper. The study reports that the Uluburun ingots are greater than 99.5% pure copper. In the Hauptmann study, a steel chisel was used to cut pieces for surface sampling of 151 of the Uluburun ingots, and 3 oxides and 1 bun were drill cored all the way through. The report states that he samples the sample showed porous volume typical of quote-unquote blister copper that, quote, exceeds by far our previous ideas of their inner structure, with void volume reaching 20% or higher, especially in the upper portions of the ingots. In general, the cavities like these, called sprotzen, are caused by the effervescence of gases such as oxygen, carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide by water from burning charcoal. This is in contrast with copper from other periods in other localities. All the ingots contain angular-shaped inclusions of iron silicate slags, features compatible with natural rocks affected by the impact of high temperatures in the solid state. These can be removed by repeated melting, but while these were regular steps, at many metallurgical sites all over the middle and southern parts of Africa, the Ulleborn ingots were not processed in this way. The angular shaping of the slag inclusions, the structure, and the existence of iskerite point to a pouring of copper into a mold when the slag was already solidified. Interfaces in the crystalline structure of the ingots points to the different batches during casting. Okay. Almost all the samples contain cuprite, distributed in changing amounts throughout the ingots, associated with large voids. The cuprite formed by corrosion in the sea does not penetrate for more than 5 millimeters or so. An oxygen-rich atmosphere necessary to produce cuprite in amount observed does not prevail during the smelting of roasting ores. We therefore can eliminate the conclusion that the ingots consist of as smelting raw copper from a smelting furnace. Most of the ore available on Cyprus is of chalcopyritic composition, and relics of sulfides are quite difficult to completely remove. Yet this mixed sulfide does not occur in the copper ingots, unquote. The Hopman study concludes that, quote, from a chemical point of view, the purity of the ingots is extraordinary in comparison with other sorts of copper from Wadi Araba, high lead, from the Caucasus, high arsenic, from Oman, high arsenic and nickel. The ingots are made of pure copper, and all the ingots show homogeneous composition. From our metallographic investigation, we are able to exclude a conscious purification or even a refining process to reduce the ingots. We see few indications that bronze scrap could have been added due to the very low tin concentration and would not include gas bubbles and slag inclusions. The ingots provide an explanation for the previous vexing question of how an ingot of metal as ductile as copper could have been broken up into small pieces such as those excavated by the hundreds in Sardinia. Two characteristics of the Ulleborn ingot stand out: the presence of a substantial degree of porosity and a high concentration of copper oxide inclusion, which made it brittle. Simply dropping the ingots onto a hard surface would easily shatter the ingots. Okay, so look, I can't get to it because it's too long, but they're questioning about where all the copper went to, okay? And here's the bow of a ship, and there's like 1,000 of these things, 1,000 bows. They all weigh tons and tons. Where did all this copper come from? Minoan traders. I heard another researcher, I can't remember his name now, but he showed a photo of an area in Kentucky or Tennessee, I think it was Tennessee, of a valley there, okay, that was flooded to create a hydroelectric dam. And before they flooded, they found a site there, an ancient site over there, and they found these ground molds made, into the ground there with these oxhide configurations. And I saw the picture of it, okay? I can't remember the guy, I can't remember the picture where I can find it. I tried looking for it, but it's not the only evidence they have here of them doing it in the Americas, okay? So I can't get to it, but I'm going to post the rest of the article. It's a very short rest of it here, but they're thinking that's where it went to. And in this article, an anthropologist, university anthropologist, who's very skeptical of it, did the research into it a little bit to try to, he wanted to disprove it, but as it turns out, he sort of found some stuff that just phenomenal here. Let's see if I can get to it before the video ends here. Okay. So here is pure copper oxide found near Topaz in the Upper Peninsula there by Professor Jim Schurz at the University of Wisconsin. Here's one of these degraded oxide ones, but he found them there. Okay. And there's the photograph of it. Okay, so he was saying something about the guys associated with Burroughs Cave, so I'm trying to discredit it. But He says, so what's the rest of the story behind this artifact? Where did it come from? In what context it was found? Where is it now? I'm pretty sure James Sturz could answer all these questions. If anyone knows how it can be reached or can make him aware of this post, I would appreciate that. Maybe we'll have a conclusion to the exciting story of the oxide ingot from Lake Gogabik. Okay? Found right here, okay? And it's my contention, guys, that they weren't coming over here from the old world to mine it. They were coming over here to the quote-unquote new world, which wasn't new, to purchase it, among other things, many other things. And it was all provided for by the native peoples who are already here. Okay? So think about that, guys. I'm going to put links to these articles so you can read them for yourself in the video description here. And much more to come. We're going to get into it. There's some other related research I want to do on this in a future video, so keep tuned, stay tuned, and I'll be catching you real soon. Bugcat7 signing out. Peace.